Okay, I'm sitting down here with Medusa, who is a fiction mentor. How are you doing today, Mo?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Very good, very good. And you're welcome. Thank you for coming on. We've been chatting back and forth. I'm very interested to hear more about your business and how you help people with their writing, with their fiction, and also learn a little bit more about the Unwritten Prose Collective, as well as a series of posts that you did recently. So, first things first, tell us a little bit about your business and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm a fiction mentor. I say I'm a fiction mentor for new or aspiring fiction writers. However, the program's really individualized. The program is called Unwritten Prose Collective. Um, it's super individualized, right? So some people need help actually with the writing itself. Some people need more mindset stuff. So it really depends on where the person is in their writing, their experience level, and I mean, how much writing they've actually done already. So I've had clients where they've done a bunch of writing, but we didn't even get into that. Um, we only talked about mindset stuff. And then I have people that have a full manuscript already, and they just like really need that person to help them make it polished, help them get it to the place that they want it to be. And then after the Unwritten Prose Collective, we do something called the Written Prose Collective. So once we get through that first program of unlearning all the things that people teach you about writing, that people, especially newer or aspiring writers, they listen to a lot of authors and like what their routine is like. And sometimes it's just not doable for people. So it's a lot more about unlearning that mindset and getting into the mindset of being a writer the way that you want to be a writer. And then after that, we can get into the writing.
Well, I think that's actually invaluable in terms of mentorship. It's interesting you talk about working with new writers and aspiring writers because when I think aspiring writers, I think people who don't have manuscripts, who maybe really want to write, but they haven't written anything just yet. And new writers, I think about people who maybe have written something, but you have people that have written full manuscripts. So what is the process of taking someone who has a manuscript already and helping them figure out how to strengthen their writing?
So again, it's really super individualized because sometimes somebody has a full manuscript already, but they don't really understand the basics yet. So we also
Mhm.
do lessons where we get into the nitty-gritty of story structure, character development, conflict, and all of that good stuff, because some people have been writing for years but never actually learned how to tell a compelling story. Um, so, with someone that is maybe a little bit more experienced and has already written a manuscript or at least their first draft, right? Um, it's really more about feedback. It's about being that person that is like basically their hand holder, their cheerleader, the person that's gonna get them excited about doing the stuff that maybe we don't love to do as writers, like editing. Some people don't like revising or rewriting. Um, so when they have a full manuscript, it's more about that stuff. If they don't have a full manuscript, it's definitely more about the mindset and getting that form of consistency that works for you individually.
hmm Yeah, I think the most important part of becoming a good writer, because really anyone can write, are you writing quality work, right? It's about learning what I call the soft rules. And I would, once we go off into our talk about submitting and receiving rejection, I would like to talk to you about what I perceive as soft rules and see if you have any input on those as well. But I wanted to sort of transition this into the series of posts that you had recently, which caught my eye. You and I have chatted previously as well. We talk about random writing stuff here and there. I feel like we just kind of hit it off. We have some mutual friends, right? But you started putting out some posts, sort of like a series of posts having to do with receiving rejection after submitting work. So could you tell me about the genesis of where this idea came from and why you felt it was important to share that with your clients and writers in general?
Yeah, so I mean, I've technically been submitting for long time since high school, I think, is the first time. So like 20 years. Um, but I really started getting more serious about submitting consistently when I took a writers and publishing course.
Mhm.
So that's where I really learned the term celebrating your rejections. I mean, literally every single class in the morning, we would say, "Hey, I got a new rejection." Everyone would clap. And it really was um, getting you in that mindset of like, okay, I'm going to keep doing this no matter what happens, because a rejection doesn't mean that my work was bad. But I think, and you hear that advice a lot, I think, especially online with people talking about writing so much on especially Instagram. You hear that advice like celebrate a rejection, you're one step closer to a yes. But I think the thing that people don't talk about a lot is you can say, yeah, it's a celebratory thing. I am one step closer to a yes. It has nothing to do with how good my writing is, but it still hurts sometimes. And I think it's important to talk about what that feels like and how we can actually move forward. Like, let's make this a tangible thing that we can actually take steps to feeling better and not getting down on ourselves and continuing to submit and continuing to write. Um, but like acknowledging the feelings that are very real.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that that is a really valuable lesson for a lot of writers. And I think the thing we don't want to admit sometimes is that, especially when we're first starting out doing submissions, is that maybe the writing isn't there, right? Which is why I believe having beta readers and getting feedback from objective parties, not just friends and family, is very, very crucial. So, what was your early experience when you started submitting? And I presume, because we're having this conversation, received some rejections. How did you take it back then, and how have you learned to deal with it now?
Yeah, I think, everyone's first rejection kind of stings a little bit.
Mhm.
I was lucky enough, like I said, I was in that class. So at the time, I was very much in that mindset of celebrating rejections. However, the issue that came about was that I was in that mindset because I knew my writing was good.
Mhm.
And I had people telling me my writing was good, not just friends and family. I'm in workshops, I'm reading it out loud, letting other people read it out loud. I know the work is good, but I was still in that mode of like, my writing's good. Why aren't they taking it? It's probably better than this person's, or I hadn't reached that point of humility yet, I think. And like you were saying a little bit earlier, it definitely um like sometimes you have to look at the writing itself. Not that the writing is bad, but like maybe there's something about the pacing, maybe there's something about the character development, maybe there's no like real arc, right? Um, and it's okay. Learning to be okay with criticism is one of the biggest parts of being a writer, I think. And especially being online and seeing a lot of indie writers, I do see that people are just putting it out and they're not getting that criticism back. And
Mm.
then they're just putting it out without really even fully editing it. Because when you're editing it yourself, you're not really editing it. You know what it's supposed to say.
I'm personally my own worst editor. I can tell you that straight up.
Yeah, you miss a lot because you know exactly what it's supposed to say. So when you're reading it, even if you're doing all the proper things, you're printing it out, you're reading it out loud, you're still going to miss a lot when you're doing it yourself. So I think humbling yourself is a really big part of it, because in any type of art, criticism is going to be a part of it, and you have to learn how to take that. Not that you should be okay with someone being mean, but
Mhm.
constructive criticism is there for a reason, and it doesn't mean that your writing sucks. It just means that it needs a little bit more polishing. That's it.
Yeah. Well, I like a lot of things that you said there, but one thing I do want to comment on is the idea of independent publishing being so pervasive right now. And I almost think, I don't necessarily think it's a detriment to writers how available that route is. But at the same time, there is an aspect to it where you might publish something before you're ready to actually publish something, you know? And I think you could have a small audience online who likes it, and when I read independent work, I do overlook some flaws, you know, because I do kind of like being inside the brain of someone who's really enthusiastic about this and basically birthed this into the world, you know. But that isn't really going to help you get to the next level, I feel, unless you do have some objective feedback. And I do think the gatekeepers at agencies and at publishers, a lot of times they are onto something when they do reject a piece. You do need to take another look at it. So would you agree with that?
Yeah, I totally agree. Um, I think like indie publishing is such a it's an advantage in a lot of ways. But like you said, sometimes you're publishing something that's not necessarily ready. And in terms of the agencies and everything like being on to something, I think you're right. Um, Now it doesn't always mean it's not always that way. Sometimes it's just not the right piece for that
Exactly.
publication.
Yep. Not the right
Uh,
fit. You're right.
but yeah, I think there's something to be said about it being rejected in that you should take a second look at it and maybe you'll find that there's something that you thought worked well but didn't work as well as you thought it did. But I heard you talk a lot about how it's okay to be rejected because then you can just expand on it,
Mhm.
rewrite it, revise it, do whatever you want with it, but then you can put it into a collection. You can self-publish these things. Um, but again, just because somebody thinks that there's something that could be fixed about the piece doesn't mean that the piece is bad itself. It just means, we should be a little bit more mindful. I think we tend to like get in our way and like we know this is good, so we're just gonna put it out.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. And something that I thought would be fun is if we share some rejection stories, because I've actually had some very, what I would say, good formative rejections over, honestly, I haven't been doing this very long, maybe 2 years, that I think, you know, it was very beneficial to hear. It stung, but it was beneficial to hear that feedback. So, um, first one, basically just, you know, it was a first 10 pages of a manuscript, and the feedback was a very, very prominent agent, by the way, said the writing's good, but it didn't grab me in the first 10 pages in a way that made me want to hear more. So I have to start thinking, you know, how do I try to fix this up in such a way where it is a little more thrilling, a little more intriguing, and it will get somebody to read the next 10 pages, right? So I think feedback like that is great. And by the way, publishers and agents, they do not owe you that kind of feedback. So that is very valuable, right? The other awesome piece of feedback I've gotten, it was from a local publisher here. And this one did sting because I went to a seminar, I met a lot of the people there. Never make it personal, by the way, because things get really awkward. But they were the ones that told me about the soft rule that I want to tell you about, which is do not say people heard things, felt things, saw things, describe it in an auditory, visual, sensorial way without using those words. Make it more immersive. And I looked back at my writing, and you can get away with this. Some authors do use that language sparingly, but I had a lot of saw, see, feel, feels, felt, all that stuff. So for me, that was a really, really good piece of feedback that made my writing a lot stronger. So have you had any experiences like that?
Um, so I'm gonna be honest, most of most of the rejections I've gotten over the years are that very copy and paste,
Ah,
thanks but no thanks. There is one, I think I can think of one time where I actually got real feedback and it was helpful. I think they said it was a flash fiction piece and it was the feedback was something about like there needs to be like a beginning and middle and end, even though it's a flash fiction and it's very short. So we want to see like a complete character arc, even in the small amount of space. And so we think like X, Y, and Z could have helped this get there. And I think that's pretty much the only time I ever got feedback at all. Yeah, usually it's just oh, like your piece was great, but not for us.
Yep. Yeah, and that stuff too, right? As you know, I'm in a position now where I have to start rejecting pieces because of my publishing company. And I can't say I've received anything yet that's just flat out been bad writing, you know? So it makes it really difficult when you do have to nitpick and you do have to pit pieces up against other pieces. So I have seen the other side of this, and it is very, very difficult. No one likes sending out rejections. So it's one of those things, you know? But I did want to ask you about this idea of soft rules, which I'm not sure if I like made up this term or something. Someone probably incepted me, but what are, if any, the soft rules that you tell your clients about when they are trying to strengthen their writing?
Yeah, my thing, and maybe this is because I've had like, education, like actual education in school, blah, blah, blah. Uh,
Oh, okay. I'm just kidding.
yeah, it's, you know what? Actually, I always tell my clients I went to school so you don't have to.
Nice. I love it.
I don't think anybody needs to go to school. I just think that it helped me get past that point of like being worried about criticism and all that. I
Absolutely.
think the main things that I tell people, um, like I said earlier, I really try to dig into story structure. And I let them know like, here's the main ones, but these are basic ones. Like you can kind of do whatever you want. Um, I get into story structure, conflict, character development, things like that, because I want my clients to understand those basics so that they have like that kind of format in their head when they at some point they don't even have to think about it anymore. It's just in the back of their head. They're writing a piece and they know like X, Y, and Z has to happen. And then, the big thing is like we got to learn the rules so that we learn how to break them.
Mhm.
So I think having those basics, like the foundations of the craft of writing, is really important. And then we can go and do whatever we want.
Yep. Are there any common, I don't want to call them mistakes, let's call them soft mistakes that you see people make when they first start out writing that could be avoided?
Um, One I see a lot is dialogue being a little unnatural.
Mhm.
And here's the thing, there's a difference because like prose is all about like writing as you speak in a way, right? But there is a difference between like actually speaking conversationally with a human in real life and then dialogue in a story. Um, so I think the thing I find is like people do a lot of things um like how they would respond in actual real life, like, oh, hey, yeah, that was cool. And
Yeah.
I think that's one of those things that you can, I guess, I hate to say this, but I guess it's like one of the tells of like, okay, like they might be a little bit newer at this, or they haven't like learned as much about dialogue. Um, and another one, I would say it's not even about like their writing itself, but the biggest one I see is people feeling like they get stuck so easily, instead of just trying things out. They're
Mm.
like, I don't know what to do next. And I'm like, well, literally, you can ask yourself what happens next. And you can write down a bunch of things that could happen, that could be potential reactions to this. But I think that's where people get stuck a lot is what happens next, and they don't know how to tie the pieces together.
hmm Yeah, and on the dialogue side, something that I've seen before, not recently, because I don't want people to listen to this and think I'm talking about their work or something as part of a submission. But in terms of, you see this sometimes in self-published work too, is dialogue feels unnatural because it's not the shorthand vernacular that people normally use, right? It's like, did you do this? No, I did not. Why would you ask that? It was not me. You know, it's that kind of thing, right? One thing that I've heard about my writing before from a manuscript analyst is that I overuse ellipses, to which I said, but people talk in ellipses. I mean, if you have a character that takes a lot of pauses to actually think about what they're saying, it can look natural. If you overuse it, it could be unnatural, but it's also just a personal choice to do those things. I personally use a lot of em dashes to add a lot of emphasis. I have heard that I use too many em dashes, but if, and this is a question I have for you, at what point is it not good writing, and at what point is it personal style,
Hmm, that is a good question because art is so subjective, so it's really
right?
hard to say. Um, but I think, I guess the line is, are you even telling a story anymore, or are you just saying things?
That's a good point. That's a good point. Is the storytelling solid? Yeah, if you can, I think readers can tell when they're in the hands of someone who knows what they're doing and they're willing to forgive something a little different. I think I have some of his books on my shelf. Stephen Graham Jones writes in a very, very weird style, in a style that's really off-putting to a lot of writers, but or sorry, a lot of readers, but a lot of readers really love his stuff. Are there any writers whose writing style, established writers whose writing style you do not like as much, if I could put you in the hot seat?
Hmm. It's hard because I'm very much a like, I only read what I want to read. Um, I'm trying to think. I mean, it's hard to say because then again, it could just be like a style thing or
Mm.
I'm not sure. I don't, hmm. Again, I'm trying to think of a specific person and I really can't because I don't think I read things I don't like.
So, in addition to doing all of this mentor work, you are a writer yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about the things that you write, maybe some projects you got in the works right now?
Yeah. So I have a long-standing full length right now that I'm writing. I mean, I've kind of taken a long break from that, but we've got a working title Laundry Girl in the mix. Um, I'm always writing short stories. I'm still in school right now too, so I'm like constantly writing for that, and then those sometimes become submissions later on. Um, so yeah, I write poetry like all the time whenever I kind of feel like I need to. I write a bunch of different stuff too. Like my favorite genre to read and even like in movies and everything is horror, but I actually write a lot of different stuff. Like I said, I write poetry, I write contemporary fiction. Sometimes I dabble in magical realism. But yeah, right now I'm actually I'm writing a horror story for your publication, so that
What?
should be fun.
Well, that's awesome. And you have published things in the past, right? You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I've dabbled in the self-publishing world, but again, that was in a time when I hadn't humbled myself as a writer yet. And I was just putting stuff out there. I think I even put out a short story collection called Unfinished or Abandoned Short Stories because instead of just finishing the stories, I just left them unfinished because I thought that was an interesting idea.
I
Um,
think it's an interesting idea.
Let's hope so. But I'm going to be honest, I've taken things down because I'm not proud of them because
Mhm.
I also wrote a memoir about being diagnosed with MS, back in 2018. That's still up there, but I don't really promote it. Um, namely because it's my dead name on the title, but also just because I wrote it in anger. I didn't really edit it that much. The formatting's terrible. Um, I still think it's a good idea, and I can maybe rewrite it one day if I feel like it. Um, but yeah, I've dabbled in the world of self-publishing, and I've had some little things published by other people here and there.
Okay, and you also do a little music, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, so. I am a vocalist. I love to say I'm a musician, except for I don't play any instruments anymore.
Same thing. My mom's a singer. I call her a musician.
Yeah, I mean, your voice technically is a an instrument, but
Oh, thank you.
yeah.
I'm just kidding.
It is though, it really is. But yeah, I put out an EP I want to say like 2 years ago, and I'm currently thinking of maybe remixing it, doing it at home by myself so that I don't have to pay other people to go record with. Um, but yeah, music is a big part of my life. Actually, before I went to school for writing, I was in school for music.
Well, do you listen to music while you write? Are you that kind of writer?
It depends. I'm sometimes, again, ADHD, there was a long time where I thought I couldn't listen to music at all because I love music so much that I started paying more attention to the music than I did the writing. Or
Mhm.
sometimes, especially if it has lyrics, I start like I start typing the lyrics into my story, unintentionally. But now I've realized that it does help me get into the mood sometimes. I've dabbled in making playlists for certain stories or certain characters, and I think that it does help. I still definitely do it in silence a lot of the times, but every once in a while, I think that it really, really enhances the mood, especially if you're changing the type of music with the scene that you're writing. I think that really does subconsciously, it changes the tone completely.
I think so too. I know some people who listen to music with lyrics while they write. I listen to instrumentals. If I will do what you're describing and start writing down the lyrics, it will seep into my writing, and it's extremely distracting. But instrumentals all the way. So what drives you to do all of these different creative things right now? So you got writing, you're teaching people how to write and collaborating with people, and you're also doing music. What drives all those things?
Oh, wow. It's hard to pinpoint what it is. I think I've grown up in a very creative family. And I don't want to sound too cliche, but it is true that, you know, trauma and the things that you've experienced in life really influence how you see the world. And I think finding art and finding music and finding writing really helped me express myself in a way that I felt like I couldn't. I always tell people I'm a writer, not a speaker, which is funny. I'm on a podcast right now, but
Hey, could have fooled me.
I try. I really do try. I think I've had some practice now, but um yeah, I think art is just really important. I think it's kind of what gets us through life. And without it, I don't think that I would want to be here. It sounds again pretty cliche, but I think it's true.
Okay, agreed 100% by the way. Um, so what does the future look like for you as an artist as you keep doing all of these really interesting creative endeavors?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that I can finish my novel and get that out somewhere, whether I self-publish it or go in the trenches of querying. Um, I'm just want to do a lot more writing. I want to do more music. Um, I love a lot of different types of things. I love reading too. I feel like that's an art in itself. Yeah, I just want to keep getting more creative and use that to my advantage in a way that I can like sustain life without having to follow somebody else's rules, essentially.
Mhm. So you have mentioned ADHD a couple of times. Are you actually diagnosed with ADHD, or is that because sometimes I joke that I have ADHD when I mean I might have it, I might not, but I just don't have a very good attention span. Are you actually diagnosed?
Yeah, so it's one of those things where you go through life and you never think that that's you because
Mhm.
the way that they explain ADHD and things like that is like it's very much in a box of like you're jumping up and down and you're running up the wall. And that's the only way that you can have it. Um, so it took a long time. I didn't get diagnosed until I mean, this is a couple years ago. I was like 30 something. And I actually had to go seek out that diagnosis. I had to go find somebody to evaluate me
Mhm.
because they don't want to diagnose adults. And I know they talk a lot about like TikTok and Instagram and everything having an influence. Like everybody's autistic now, everybody has ADHD. And I don't think it's that. I think it's that people are realizing because there's that community now. And so they're understanding at an older age when, when they were younger, nobody thought that that was them. But now they're an adult and they're like, oh, it's actually like hard to function sometimes. And
Mhm.
maybe getting a diagnosis would help me.
Mhm. Well, does that in any way, would you say, inform the way that you write or your creative process or anything like that?
Yeah, I think that's probably why it's the my main thing in my business and teaching clients is how to unlearn everything that people tell you about how to be
Mhm.
consistent as a writer because a lot of people unintentionally this happens subconsciously clients of mine end up also having ADHD and or having chronic illness like I do just whatever it is I find that it should be said more like, hey, I'm a writer and I can like put out really great stuff and this is something that I care about, but I also don't do that every day. And sometimes I like put 5 words into it, and sometimes I'm hyper focused and I put like 8,000 words in one day, right? So I think it's important to understand that everybody's individual and we all have our own process, and it's okay if you put down the laptop for a month. Your story is not going anywhere.
That's interesting because I have had people on this podcast who talk about their writing routines, and some people have a daily goal, some people have a weekly goal, but it sounds like what you're saying is just do whatever works for you and don't put pressure on yourself. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, so I think the one of the big things I teach my clients too is that consistency doesn't mean a strict schedule. It just means consistent for you. So if
Mhm.
you are, let's say you're working on it once a week or whatever, even if you like miss one week, even if you miss that day, you're still thinking about it, you're
Mhm.
still putting effort into it, and you're going to get back to it next week. So it really doesn't matter like the progress that you make isn't lost by you not doing it one day or not reaching the goal that you had in mind.
Mhm. And how important is outlining when it comes to talking to your clients about their writing process? Because I know a lot of people swear by it. A lot of people do a very robust, very detailed outline. Some do a very loose outline, and some just like to have a bare bones idea and just go for it.
Yeah, again, that's one of those things that's very individual because personally for me, especially being in a school environment where I have to like push out short stories really quickly, I'm very much the person that just goes ahead and writes. Um, but I help people find like what works better for them. And usually people know that, right? Like if you are more of a planner, then you should make an outline. If you're just like got these ideas and you want to get them down on paper, then you should just go for it. So I think it's working with the person individually, like with everything else. It's all about like, okay, like this is the needs of my client. So let's help them get there, whatever way that looks like for them.
Okay. Great. And I completely agree with that. I wouldn't give anybody any advice personally on writing. I would say this is what I do and this is what I've heard other people do, right? I mean, you have to make it fun. I think a lot of writer's block, personally, I feel like it comes from people just falling out of love with an idea or maybe an idea not feeling fully fleshed out, right? So we are running out of time and we need to wrap up soon. So the last question I want to ask you is there anything cool that you've read or watched recently that you want to tell people about?
Yeah, so I became hyper fixated on the show Only Murders in the Building.
Okay.
It's really great, like nostalgia to have Steve Martin and Martin Short back together again.
Oh, they're fabulous.
In terms of like reading and stuff, I'm gonna pick up World War Z soon because for a super secret project that I maybe need some research for. Maybe, wink,
I
wink.
know I know nothing about this
Um,
project.
okay. Um, Also, I have something right here. Maybe you've heard of it. I don't know. It's called
Oh, I
That's
heard
from
hey,
Prey.
I heard
Um,
that one was good. Yeah, I hope you
yeah.
enjoy.
So yeah, that's on my TBR. Right now I'm taking a little bit of a break. I'm really like going hard on the writing instead. Um,
Great.
but yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, it was so much fun having you here and having a chat. Thank you so much for picking up my book, by the way. I'm super grateful. But yeah, I think you are awesome, and I think what you do is really great. And I hope that, this message touches a bunch of people, and maybe you get to partner with other aspiring writers out there because I think you obviously have a lot to offer that field. So thanks so much for being with me.
All right, thank you for having me.